In the year 2020, the United States did something it had never done to a rival superpower. It reached across the world and cut China off from a single machine. Not a bomb, not an army, a machine. The most complex and most expensive machine that human beings have ever built, and the only machine on the entire planet that can carve the finest circuits of an advanced computer chip. There is exactly one company on Earth that knows how to make it, and Washington made certain that company would never ship one to China. The logic was cold and simple. Without that machine, China's chip industry would be frozen in place, stranded at least a decade behind the West, unable to build the tiny brains that run everything from your phone to an artificial intelligence. They called it the choke point. It was meant to be a stranglehold, and then, 3 years later, in a quiet store in the city of Shenzhen, a phone went on sale with a chip inside it that, according to nearly every expert in the Western world, was simply not supposed to exist. Tonight, I am going to show you exactly how China built the chip that could not be built, why it should never have worked, and why the single most powerful weapon in the entire technology war just failed in front of the whole world. Let me start with the machine, because you cannot understand any of this until you understand what America took away. The machine is called an extreme ultraviolet lithography system. Forget the name. Here is what it does. A modern computer chip is a maze of wires and switches so small that billions of them fit on a fingernail. To draw a pattern that fine, you need light with an incredibly short wavelength, and you need to focus it with mirrors so perfectly smooth that if you scaled one up to the size of a country, the biggest bump would be a fraction of the height of a single hair. Only one company in the world, a Dutch firm named ASML, ever solved that problem. Each machine costs hundreds of millions of dollars, takes years to build, and ships in dozens of crates. Every advanced chip in every iPhone, every NVIDIA processor, every American weapon system is drawn by one of these machines. Whoever controls that machine controls the future. And in 2020, America made sure China would never touch one. So picture the situation from Beijing's side of the table. Your largest chip maker, a company called SMIC, is now locked out of the one tool everyone agrees you need to make a cutting-edge chip. The Western consensus was blunt and confident. China would be stuck making old, simple chips, the kind in a microwave or a car key, while the rest of the world raced ahead into a future China could only watch. That was the plan. That was the whole point of the ban. Freeze them out, keep them a decade behind, and win the century without firing a shot. Now here is where the story turns, and I want you to feel how strange this was for the people who study chips for a living. In August of 2023, Huawei, a company America had spent years trying to crush, quietly put a new flagship phone on sale. No big launch event, no fanfare. Reviewers did what reviewers do. They tore it open, and inside they found a processor called the Kirin 9000S, a genuinely advanced 7-nanometer chip, the kind you are told requires the exact machine China had been banned from. It had been built inside China, by SMIC, without a single one of those forbidden machines. The reaction in Washington was not celebration, obviously. It was alarm. The United States Commerce Department opened an investigation into how it was even possible. Members of Congress demanded answers, because the chip in that phone was not just a phone chip. It was proof that the stranglehold had a hole in it. If you want to understand the quiet technology war that is deciding which country runs the next 100 years, then subscribe to Sinova, because cutting through the noise and showing you what actually happened and what it actually means is the entire reason this channel exists. Now let me explain how China pulled it off, because the method is the most important part of the whole story. Remember, China was banned from the newest machine, the extreme ultraviolet one. But there is an older, less powerful machine, the previous generation, called a deep ultraviolet system. China was still allowed to buy those, and it bought a great many of them. On its own, that older machine is not supposed to be able to draw a pattern anywhere near fine enough for a 7-nanometer chip. And here is the trick, the sheer stubborn brilliance of it. If your light is too coarse to draw the fine pattern in one clean pass, Then you draw it in many passes. You expose the wafer, shift everything a tiny amount with perfect precision, expose it again and again and again, layering the pattern up piece by piece until the final result is as fine as if you had used the machine you were denied. The Western way, with the forbidden machine, takes about 9 passes. The Chinese way, with the older machine, takes more than 30 of them. 30 exposures, each one aligned to within a rounding error, to conjure a chip the world said was impossible. It is slower. It is far more expensive, but it works. China did not beat the ban by inventing a magic new machine. It beat the ban by refusing to accept that the old machine had a limit, and then doing the same job the hard way, over and over, until it came out right. And you might be wondering why Washington cared so much about one kind of chip in the first place. The answer is artificial intelligence. The most advanced chips are the engines of AI, the processors that train the systems now reshaping every industry and every military on Earth. The real fear behind the ban was never really about phones. It was about keeping China out of the artificial intelligence race by starving it of the chips that race runs on. So when China proved it could build advanced chips at home, it was not simply telling the world it could make a nicer phone. It was telling the world it could not be locked out of the most important technology of the century. That is why one torn-open phone in Shenzhen set off alarms in Washington that 1,000 ordinary phones never could. The chip was the message, and the message was, you cannot switch us off. And I promised you honesty, so here is the part the loudest voices online leave out, and it matters. This method is not free. Doing 30 passes instead of 9 means every wafer takes much longer and costs far more, and more of them come out broken. In the early runs, only about 1 chip in 5 was good enough to use. The cost to make each wafer runs roughly half again higher than what a company like the market leader in Taiwan pays with the modern machine. So no, China has not magically caught up. Its best chips still lag the very top of the industry in speed, in efficiency, and in price. If this were a simple race of who has the best chip today, China would still be behind. But that was never the real question. The real question was whether the ban could freeze China in place. And the answer, now written in silicon, is no. And there is a reason it was Huawei, of all companies, that delivered this blow, because Huawei was supposed to be finished. For years, America had waged an open campaign to destroy it. It cut Huawei off from Google, so its phones lost the apps the rest of the world runs on. It blocked Huawei from buying advanced chips anywhere on the planet. It even had the company's chief financial officer detained abroad for years. By every Western measure, Huawei's phone business had been strangled and left for dead. And then it walked right back onto the shelves with a chip nobody believed China could make, and sold out almost instantly to buyers at home who treated that phone as a point of national pride. The one company the West tried hardest to kill became the exact company that proved the West's whole strategy had failed. Here is the part that should genuinely change how you see this, because a single chip could have been a fluke, a one-time stunt to save face. It was not. Watch what happened next. China did not stop at that first 7-nanometer chip and quietly celebrate. It pushed the same stubborn method further and further. By the end of 2025, SMIC had moved an even more advanced process into full volume production, squeezing the density down to roughly what the industry calls a 5-nanometer class chip, and it went straight into Huawei's newest flagship phone. Let that sink in. The ban was supposed to trap China at least a full decade behind. Instead, using nothing but the older machine and an almost insane amount of engineering patience, China clawed its way to within a couple of years of the frontier, and it is still climbing. Every year, the gap that was supposed to be frozen gets a little smaller. And the choke point itself, the thing the entire strategy was built on, is beginning to close. Remember, the whole Western advantage rested on one idea, that only one company in one country could ever build the machine that matters. China took that as a to-do list. Chinese firms are now building their own versions of the older deep ultraviolet machines, so that even those cannot be taken away. And in late 2025 came the news that Western planners feared most. Chinese researchers, some of them former engineers from the very Dutch company that holds the monopoly, revealed a working prototype of a homegrown extreme ultraviolet machine, the Forbidden Machine. It is early, it is rough, and by honest estimates it will not be ready for real production until around the end of this decade. But the wall has a crack in it now, and cracks do not heal. The one machine that was supposed to be China's permanent ceiling is being rebuilt, part by part, inside China itself. And China did not only play defense, it answered the ban with a warning of its own. It turned out that the West's chip industry has its own dependencies, and many of them run straight through China. So Beijing began restricting exports of the critical raw materials that Western factories quietly rely on. Things like gallium and germanium, materials most people have never heard of, but without which, you cannot build the very chips and lasers the West takes for granted. The message was pointed and clear. If you try to cut us off at the top of the chain, remember that we sit on the bottom of it. A ban meant to prove Western leverage instead revealed just how tangled the two sides really are, and how much of the modern world quietly runs through China, whether the West likes it or not. So step back and look at what actually happened here, because the lesson is bigger than any one chip. America found the single most important choke point in the modern world, the machine that draws the brains of civilization, and it slammed that door on China as hard as it possibly could. It was, on paper, the perfect weapon, and it backfired. The ban did not freeze China. It enraged China, focused China, and forced China to build its own entire chip industry from the ground up, from the raw machines to the finished processors, faster than anyone believed was possible. A country that might have kept happily buying Western tools for another 20 years was instead pushed, hard, into becoming self-sufficient. The choke point that was meant to keep China dependent is the exact thing that is making China independent. That is not a Chinese talking point. That is just what the last few years actually show. And the scale of that push is hard to overstate. China is pouring tens of billions of dollars into building every link of the chip chain at home, from the raw silicon to the machines that shape it, to the software that designs it. Whole cities are being turned into chip hubs. An entire generation of Chinese engineers is being pointed at one single national goal: to never again depend on a tool that a foreign government can simply take away. You can ban a company from buying a machine. It is far harder to ban a country from learning how to build one. And that, in the end, is the quiet lesson underneath this whole affair. None of this means the war is over, and I am not here to tell you China has already won, because it has not. The West still holds a real lead at the very top of the chip world, and China is still paying a heavy price in cost and yield to stay in the game. But the myth, the comfortable Western myth that a single export ban could simply switch China off, is dead. It died the moment a torn-open phone in Shenzhen revealed a chip that was not supposed to be there. The most powerful lever the West had, the one everyone assumed was unbreakable, turned out to have a time limit. And the clock is running the wrong way for the people who pulled it. If you want to keep seeing exactly how this quiet war is unfolding, the breakthroughs, the bans, and the real story underneath the headlines, then subscribe to Sonova. Because the next time someone tells you that one machine, or one ban, or one rule can hold back a nation of 1 billion people that has decided to catch up, you can just point at the chip that was never supposed to exist, humming away right now inside a phone in someone's pocket, and let it answer for you.